The Ichimoku indicator I am using is from Lizard Indicators, right? So you can just go to lizardindicators.com. All right, so let's start with, we have a bunch of rules here, so we'll just kind of go through them one at a time. All right, the Tenkan and Kijun need to be crossed, right? So for a long, actually it's not crossed, but above or below each other. So for a long, we need the Tenkan above the Kijun and vice versa for a short. So the Tenkan above the Kijun. And so let's open up our indicators again. Need to familiarize myself again with these lines. So here we go. The Tenkan is the blue above the Kijun, which is red. So the blue line above the red. So there's the blue line. So that's the Tenkan. And here's the Kijun, the red line. So let's just create a simple comparison solver because we want to know which of these lines is above or below the other. All right, so we're going to grab a comparison solver for this. All right, so input A, that'll be the Tenkan. And so open up our select indicator window. It's going to Lizard Indicators, and we're going to be doing this a lot. Scrolling down to the Ichimoku, and the Tenkan is already it's the first plot on the list, so it's already selected for us. All right, we're good to go. Click OK. Input B. Let's shrink this up a little bit. All right, input B. And that'll be our Kijun. So open up Lizard Indicators again. Scroll down. There we go. There's our Ichimoku, and now we want the Kijun line. Select that. All right, so we don't need to change the long output or the short output. So if we look at this, remember we want to stay focused on the red and the blue lines. And so the Tenkan is the blue line. The Kijun is the red line. All right. So here we go. The Tenkan blue line is below the red line. So we have a short output versus a long output, right? Bias. So, or filtering, whatever you want to call it. All right. So that would be rule number 1. If you wanted to. Sometimes I don't do this very often, but sometimes we can just put like a number 1 in there, something like that. I'll just put a number 1 in there. There. So we know that basically this solver is rule number 1, or condition number 1. All right. So the next one, number 2. This time we're looking at the Kumo cloud, and so it needs to be thin. Obviously, thin is subjective. Computers don't know what thin is or thick. Even one trader to the next isn't gonna, one trader to the next is gonna have a different definition of what is thin and what is thick. So we actually got Jacob to come up with a value here. So it's actually going to be 4 points. All right. So so the Kumo cloud, needs to be less than 4 points. And it looks like we have a secondary rule as a part of this. So, okay. So what we're doing here is really we're waiting for the Kumo cloud to be bullish. All right. So we're going to have to evaluate the Tenkan and Kijun cross and evaluate where that cross is in comparison to the Kumo cloud. So let me open up the indicator again here. Okay. So the Kumo cloud is what's shaded in, right? You can see the shaded green and the shaded salmon areas, right? So the shaded area, that's the Kumo cloud. So we're basically kind of comparing the Tenkan and Kijun, where they are when they cross in relationship to the cloud. Is it above the Kumo cloud or below the Kumo cloud? So, all right. So we only need a thin Kumo cloud Yeah, if a long cross happens below the Kumo cloud. If a long cross, let's see. Here we go. So here would be a long cross below the Kumo cloud. So our Kumo cloud needs to be less than 4 points right there. You know, on the bar that we get this crossover. All right. So let's see. Yeah, you know what? Let me take a step back here. Yeah, so actually this Tenkan and Kijun is actually a crossover condition. So yeah, long positions are initiated when the Tenkan crosses the Kijun. So actually this needs to be a crossover solver here. So instead of a comparison, it needs to be a crossover. So I'm just going to set that off to the side for now. And instead, let's grab a crossover solver here. And I'll just copy that name. So we're looking for a crossover situation of the Tenkan and Kijun. So let's go plug in our input A and input B. So let's go find that indicator again. There it is. All right, we want the Tenkan first, and then input B will be the Kijun. All right, so there's the Kijun selected now. Of course, don't forget, you know, if you are changing any of these shift values here, you know, if you're shifting any of the lines around, you know, just remember to adjust your indicator settings. Okay, so there we go. So now we have some crossover signals. Cool. So if the cross up is below the cloud, we want to make sure the Kumo cloud is thin. And same thing, yeah, so if the cross down is above the cloud, let's just double check here. So yeah, so if the cross is above the Kumo cloud, then we also want to make sure that the cloud is less than 4 ticks. So basically, you know, this crossover solver is basically kind of like this is like the signal bar, or, you know, the actual triggering condition, you know, that fires off the signal. And so everything else is basically going to become filtering, right? Filtering the main signal condition. All right, so the Kumo cloud, let me just pull up the indicator again and just remind myself so the Kumo cloud is the Senku A and the Senku B span. Senku A and Senku B span. So, you know, and in order to check this, you know, the thickness of the cloud, or the distance between the clouds here, to make sure that, you know, that they have a minimum, make sure that, right, that our Kumo cloud has a minimum of 4 points, we're going to grab a comparison solver. There we go. So we're going to make sure that Kumo cloud is 4 points or less. All right, so input A. Yeah, let's go find that indicator. And so we want the Senku span A. And so the distance, or the difference that we're looking for, we want points. So let's change from ticks to points, like so. And we'll put in 4 points, like so. All right, then input B, that'll be the other side of the Kumo cloud. Again, go up to lizard indicators. There's our Ichimoku, and now the Senku span B. All right, now for the outputs. Right, we don't want the Senku span A to be greater than the Senku span B, right? So we don't want these outputs here. We actually want A to equal B within 4 points, right? We want these two, right? We want these two lines of the cloud to be within 4 points of each other. So we're going to use this A equals B within 4 points, like so. All right, let's take a look. So yeah, apparently, I guess on the RTY, you know, that cloud is always less than 4 points. Here we go. So here, we actually found, yeah, the cloud here is a little thicker than 4 points right here. So it doesn't happen that often, looks like. So maybe what was intended was ticks. So if we adjust this down to ticks, let's take a look. So yeah, there we go. So 4 ticks on the Kumo cloud, you know, it happens quite a bit more if we look at this. Yeah. There we go, right? So that's, I guess, you know, that looks visually fairly thin, right? 4 ticks. So look, I'll leave it on 4 ticks here. Just because otherwise it doesn't look like we're going to get a lot of signals. Well, actually, I'm sorry. We're not going to get much filtering. So if I leave it on 4 points, it basically looks like every single signal is going to get through. You know, if I reduce it down to 4 ticks instead, you know, then we're actually going to get some filtering going, you know, some actual filtering. If the Tenkan and the Kijun, you know, cross on the wrong side of the cloud. So now we need to evaluate the cross, you know, need to evaluate the Tenkan and the Kijun and see where they are in relationship to the Kumo cloud. Yeah, so this is going to be fairly complex here. Now, this says the cross. So, you know, just a technical note here. Yeah, let me see if I can find that area I was at earlier. All right, I'll use this part of the chart here to help me explain. So there's a cross. Somewhere in there is a cross. It's kind of hard to see. Yeah, let me make some color adjustments here so we can see these crossovers. There we go. Let's knock down that opacity. All right, that helps. And then also let's make this blue a little brighter. All right, yeah, so we can see the Tenkan and Kijun crossing inside the cloud there. So back to the point that we're making here. The crossover price can't be calculated. So NinjaTrader doesn't actually have a way to calculate the price of the crossover itself, right? Because crossovers happen in between bars. You can't actually get the price of that crossover, right? So what you can get is you can get the price of the indicator after the crossover, or you can look at the price of the plot before the crossover, right? But you can't actually get that crossover price. NinjaTrader just doesn't calculate that. So let's see, what should we do here? All right, so we have a cross down and it's above our cloud. So we need to ask ourselves, which of these lines is closest to the cloud? And so we can see the blue line, which is the Tenkan. The blue line is closer to the cloud. So if we have a cross down, we'll evaluate the Tenkan to the cloud to see if this crossover, right, was above the cloud. And if it's a cross up, we'll compare it's probably, actually no, you know what, it's going to be the Tenkan on both. Let's see here. Here we go. So here's a cross up below the cloud. And so again, it's going to be the blue Tenkan line. We'll compare that to the cloud. Now, the next thing we have to look at is, okay, we're comparing the Tenkan to the cloud, but the cloud is the cloud is actually 2 plot lines here, right? You know, so we need to do 2 comparisons here, right? We'll have to make sure that the blue line is below the Chikkou span A and below the Chikkou span B lines. All right, so we're going to need several comparison solvers to determine whether the Tenkan, you know, whether the Tenkan at the point of the crossover, whether the Tenkan was below or above the cloud. So let's grab a couple of comparison solvers here and just start going to work. Okay, so here's our Tenkan selected for us. And now B, that'll be the 2 cloud lines. Let's see what else we got here. So there's our 2 cloud lines, right? The Chikkou span A, Chikkou span B. We actually have some pre-lines here. Oh, that's right. So, yeah, I was kind of wondering about this. I kind of had it in the back of my mind here that we actually had what are called data series here that will help us do some evaluations very quickly. Yes, so this is kind of a sign of a good programmer, where, you know, a programmer will take into consideration things like this, where you're comparing, you know, one plot to 2 other plots. And so in this case, the cloud is 2 plots, right? So we can see here, where to go? Let's scroll down. So if we look at this, we have a Kumo low series and high series, right? So a cloud, you know, so in this case, right, the cloud has a lower cloud line versus a higher cloud line, right? And that's right, the high versus the low is regardless of which of these plots it is, right? So we can actually compare. So this actually makes our comparing our Tenkan to the cloud actually becomes a lot easier, because we can just compare it to one output. So this Kumo low series is actually the lower edge of the cloud, regardless of whether this low, this low side of the cloud, it doesn't matter if it's the span A or span B. Basically these 2 plots are, in the indicator, swapped out to this Kumo low series. So this Kumo low will either be the span B or the span A, whichever one is lowest. So that makes our job a lot easier. Yeah, so here, the Tenkan, the blue line is below the cloud. We're getting a short output. And then let's scroll forward here. Now, you see right here, right, our blue line, as soon as it crosses above the low of the cloud, it turns long, right? We're getting a long output. So we actually, to check for that cross, we want the Tenkan to be above the high of the cloud, right? So what we can do is go back into input B, scroll down, and so for a long output, we want to make sure that the Tenkan line is above the Kumo high of the cloud, right? The high of the cloud. We can do that and see what happens. Yeah, there we go. Right? So when the Tenkan is in the middle of the cloud, there's no output. Right? So there we go. So now So now we can tell whether the crossover is below the cloud or above the cloud. So I need a way to basically tie this kind of detection mechanism, back into the actual rule number 2 here, which is, right, we need a thin cloud only if the long cross happens below the Kumo cloud. So it happens below. Yep. Yeah, this is an interesting puzzle here. Let's see. All right, yeah, so we actually have a good test location on our chart. So our Tenkan and Kijun cross is below the cloud, and so we need our cloud to be thin right here. So we need our cloud to be thin. And so remember this guy right here, let me adjust the name, because if you remember, I adjusted this down to 4 ticks. And our cloud, we can see, is thicker than 4 ticks. Right? There's no output. So whenever this solver gives us an output, it's telling us that our cloud is 4 ticks or less. Right? Okay. So I think what I'm going to do here, all right. So I just reversed the output of this solver. So when the blue line is below the cloud, I'm getting a long output. So I wanted this long output to synchronize with our crossover condition. So we have a long crossover and it's below the cloud. Right? So the crossover is below. So I wanted these 2 outputs to synchronize. And with an AND node, there. All right, so we have a crossover, a long crossover below the cloud. And this short crossover below the cloud is removed now, right? Because if you remember we only need to check the cloud thickness if a long cross happens below the Kumo cloud, right? So a short cross doesn't need to be checked for the cloud thickness. So, and let's do the other. Let's check the other. Yeah. So here are some cross downs above the cloud, and they're identified. So I can use this signal here to tell me, when do I need to check the thickness of the cloud. All right, so now I need to tie that into this. All right, so this is, I think, this is going to be a rare situation. Let's see. There's usually a couple ways that you can do stuff. So, the way to kind of determine whether we need to, check the cloud thickness is to use an if-then node. I'm trying to think if there's a way that I could just do it with pure and with Boolean logic using and or nodes. Yeah, I'm not sure how to accomplish that yet. So I'm going to use the if-then node. I'm not sure this is actually going to work. Here we go. Let's see. Yeah, maybe it is working correctly. We have our cross up, and our cloud looks like it's really thin. Cool. So let's verify this here. Yeah, so if I just look at the cloud thickness, yeah, we can see here. So when the cloud is crossing here, we have, you know, several bars here, about 7 bars, where this cloud is thin enough. And so on this long cross up, we actually get the cross up signal, right? We get the crossover signal. All right, let's see if I can find a cross down that actually gets through as well. Here we go. Great. We got a bunch of crossovers here. And yeah, this cloud is pretty thin. I guess it's relatively thin to the cloud previous back a little far. So let's zoom in here, take a look. So here we go. We have a cross down that is above. Let's mark that. There we go. There's our crossover above the cloud, and that cloud is within 4 ticks of thinness. And another cross down. Another cross down. Actually, this looks like this is going to be a good place to work. So we have another cross down, and then we have a cross up as well. Our cross up is above the cloud, so we don't need to do this check of how thick the cloud is, right? So this cross up should just go right through, right? Because it's above the cloud. So that's what makes this kind of a good location on our chart to kind of verify our logic here. Oh, and over here. So look, we have a cross up below the cloud. Oh, and yeah, there's no signal there. So yeah, so we know that the cloud is actually too thick right now. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. So we have a cross down below the cloud. So yeah, so ultimately we need to get this cross down to show up. And then going back here, we need to get this cross up to show through as well. There we go. I made those circles extra tall to help us see those. There we go. There. All right. So we have our, our conditional crossover signals working right now, right? So if the crossover is on the wrong side of the cloud, we're making sure that the cloud is thin. And now we need to get these, I guess you could call them normal or preferred, maybe preferred crossovers, right? Because the crossover is on the better side of the cloud, right? On the correct side of the cloud. So we need to get those through. So, all right. So here's our crossover. And so remember this solver here tells us which side of the cloud that we're on. Something got changed in this solver here. All right. So I'm looking at, right, where sometimes we get this long and short on the same bar. Yeah, so whenever, right, our blue line goes inside the cloud, we're getting a long and short at the same time. So what happened here? Oh, right. I reversed my outputs. So that's what happened. Let's see. Yeah, I need to fix this. All right. I'm going to put it back to the way I had it, right? So there. So if the blue line's below the cloud, right, we're getting a short. Oh, hold on. Let me put it back. Let's undo this again. And I just need to go in. I need to go into input B. So remember, input A, that's our blue line, the Tenkan line. Input B, right, that's either the low of the cloud or the high of the cloud. So if I go here, if I switch my plots around, if I reverse my plots, right, at first I had it long and then short, but now if I use the other line, go long and go short, there we go. So that's what we're looking for. So if the blue line's below the cloud, we want a long output. If the blue line's in the middle of the cloud, right, no output. Yeah, if the blue line's above the cloud, then a short output. All right, let's just make sure this is still working. So we're going to check our if-then node. Make sure everything's still working. All right. Yeah, so here's those short outputs again. Yeah, if we look at this, right? So remember, I had this one circled. So we have a cross down. But if we look at our blue line, you know, this happens sometimes when you're comparing crossovers, you know, to another indicator or some other plot, right? We can see the crossover is above the cloud. But of course, we don't have the price of the actual crossover point because it's in between bars, right? It's in between our two bars. But our blue line actually goes inside the cloud. And so, you know, so basically this condition of looking at the blue line to the cloud didn't work in this case. And so we actually would need to look back one bar and see, you know, wow, was our Tenkan blue line, you know, before the crossover, was it above the cloud? And yes, it was. So we'll add in a little fudge factor here. So let's see here. Let's see now. This was the cloud thickness. There we go. Okay. So this was the solver. Yeah, comparing our Tenkan line to the Kumo cloud. All right. So what we can do, right? This solver is looking, right? So after the crossover, it's looking at the Tenkan and the cloud after the crossover. And that, right, using a displacement of 0 means you're looking, basically, you're using the current bar values. So if we want to use the values one bar back, so if we want to use the value of the Tenkan to the cloud, we would use a displacement of 1. So let's do this. I'm just going to put a 0 by the Tenkan and the Kumo, and that'll help us differentiate between this new solver that we need. So there we go. There's the Tenkan 0 and the Kumo 0. I'm going to make a copy of that. And this time, you know, I'm really abbreviating things here, but we're going to look at the Tenkan line one bar back. So I'm just going to use 1, the number 1, to basically remind me that my displacement is going to be set to 1. So I'm looking at the Tenkan line one bar back by using this displacement. And then for the Kumo cloud, I'm going to leave that at 0. I'm going to leave that at 0. So what we're doing, you know, we kind of need to zoom in here, is we're looking, hold on, right? It helps to have the chart so that you only see the current bar. So right, so this is our current bar after the cross, right? After the crossover. So with our solver having a displacement of 1 and a displacement of 0, what that effectively is doing is we're looking at the Kumo line, 1 bar back, and comparing it to the cloud line of the current bar, right? So we're taking 1 bar back of the blue line and seeing, is our blue line above the cloud before the crossover, right? So again, the crossover is right there where my cursor's at, and the crossover is in between bars, right? So we're looking before the crossover and saying, well, was the Tenkan above the cloud? Because after the crossover, the Tenkan was inside the cloud, and so we would have missed this signal. So since we can't look at the crossover price, at least what we can do is look at the current price of the Tenkan, and then also look back 1 bar of the Tenkan, and say, well, was the Tenkan above 1 bar back? If so, then that's okay. We'll just use this dual check here to kind of verify if our crossover was above the clouds. It's not exact, it's not perfect, but it's as close as we can get since NinjaTrader doesn't provide us the crossover prices, the price of that actual crossover point. So this is basically as good as we're going to get here. Okay, so here's our solver. Let's put it on the board. So we'll go to existing nodes. Down here, here's our Tenkan 1 bar back to the Kumo cloud of the current bar. Put it in there. So if we look at this, right, there's no signal on this crossover. However, if we make an adjustment here, let's pull both of these back. And if I use an OR node, and let's look at the OR node. All right, there you go. So this OR node is telling us, hey, that the Tenkan line was above the cloud. Even here, right? So even on this bar here, right, where we can see the Tenkan line, yeah, let's move that out of the way. Right, we can see the blue line went inside the cloud, but because 1 bar back it was above the cloud, we're still getting a short output there. Right, so now if I look at our AND node, right, all we're seeing is the crossover, so we had a cross down, right? So this is our crossover going into the AND node with no filtering, and so now if I connect the OR node in, right, we still get to keep our crossover, our cross down above the cloud. So we still get to keep that. Right. Okay. So there we go. So we fixed this crossover above the cloud. All right, let's see what's next here. We still need to get the crossover signals for the cross ups above the cloud, right? So I've got it marked here with my arrow. And also, here we go. Here's the other arrow, right? So the cross down below the cloud, we still need to get those through here. So let's see here. Yeah, just going to put some markers on there, right? So this is going to be a cross down. And that's going to be a cross up. So let's remind ourselves, what do we have here? What is this OR node telling us? Well, what it's telling us is when our blue line is below the cloud, we're getting a short output. If the blue line is inside the cloud, no output, right? So where our arrows are at, let's get this back over here, right? Where our arrows are at, right? So if our blue line, cross down is below the cloud, right? We want to get a short cross down. But, right, our little solver here, condition, it's giving us a long output, right? But we want a short. So we just need to reverse our outputs here, right? We need to turn this we need to turn this long into a short, right? Because the blue line is below the cloud. So we need to, reverse or swap this long output for a short output. So let's see here. Before we go a little too far, let's see. Let's give this OR node a name here. So let's see. This is the Tenkan. It's going to give us a long output if the Tenkan is below, or it's going to give us a short output if the Tenkan is above the Kumo. So that's what this is giving us. And so what we can do is grab a long-short modifier. And we're going to use the swap mode. Remember, the swap mode is what reverses long outputs into short outputs and short outputs into long outputs. So we're using swap. Because technically we're not reversing. In a technical sense, we're not actually reversing. And I'm not going to go into that. So that would be another 15-minute discussion. So technically it is a swap. That's why we called it swap instead of reversing. But the short version is, look, if we look at our long short modifier here, there we go. When the blue line is below the cloud, we now have that short condition. And if the blue line goes above the cloud, our blue line is above that cloud for only a couple of bars, but we have a long output, right? So if we're looking for this cross down right here with the white arrow, that cross down, right? With the blue line being below the cloud, we need this short bias to match up with the short cross down. So, all right, so here's all the crossovers, but all we want to see are the crossovers that match up with what side of the cloud we're on. So if I connect this in now, there we go. So when the blue and the red line, right, cross down below the cloud, we're getting our crossover signals, right? So this is a short cross down below the cloud. And this is a cross up above the cloud. So basically these are our two kind of crossover situations here. So if we go back, right, so we're taking the Tenkan and the Kijun crossover. But if the Kumo cloud, right, we have this requirement, the Kumo cloud needs to be thin if our Tenkan and Kijun crossovers, basically if they happen on the wrong side of the cloud. So these two AND nodes are basically our crossovers. So let's see here. Let's give this a name. Can't really think of a shorter abbreviation, but basically, if the, depending on whether our Tenkan and Kijun crossover is on the correct side of the cloud or the wrong side of the cloud, of course, correct and wrong are subjective, but, in the terms of this system, we have a definition. Yeah. So if the If the Tenkan crossover is on the correct side of the cloud, it's going to come out of this upper AND node. If the Tenkan crossover is on the wrong side of the cloud, then we have to look for this cloud thickness filtering, and that's our other AND node here. And actually, sorry, that actually is our if node. Sorry. That's coming out of our if then node. There we go. That's more appropriate. Yeah, see if we can get this situated a little better. There we go. That looks a little more readable. So now we can use an OR node, and basically these 2 points are the, unfiltered crossovers and the filtered crossovers connected into the OR node. All right. So yeah, we can even rename this if then here and call it, something like, I don't know, filtered crossovers, right? All right. So these are basically all of the crossovers that we have to work with, some unfiltered and some filtered. So, all right. So let me review the rules here and see if we can see what our next step is. Yeah. So we have rule 1, and then rule 2, which are basically our filtered crossovers if it's on the wrong side of the cloud. All right, so rule number 3. So for a long, it says the future Kumo. So I'm not sure what future Kumo means. Cloud, yeah, it needs to be bullish. Yeah, this is one of those interesting things with the Ichimoku. I need to increase the margin a little bit more. There we go. All right, so 100. Yeah, so we can see that this cloud, right, sticks out into the future. Of course, it's not really something in the future. The cloud has been displaced. So this cloud is, let's see here. Let me go into my list of indicators. And you remember, right, I have some EMAs here from the last question. And, if we use this displacement function, so if I displace by 10 bars, oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, so NinjaTrader actually isn't, NinjaTrader is actually cutting the plot line off. Yeah, I think indicators used to plot into the future. Basically the whole plot was shifted to the right when you use this displacement. It doesn't look like that happens anymore. Okay. Yeah, I'll set that displacement back down to 0. Yeah. So anyways, the programmer over at Lizard Indicators did a really good job at figuring out how to take a plot and extend it into the future so you can still see it. Yeah, cool. All right. So the thing about this is that, obviously, this indicator isn't predicting, the moving average, in the future. It's taking, so what this plot here is actually, coming from the current bar, but it's just the plot itself is just being shifted into the future. So there's no futuristic calculations being done here. So let's see. Yeah, so the future cloud needs to be, so we need to look at the cloud, X bars into the future. Let's see here. Let's open up the indicator list again. And I need to look and see. So let's see. B shift. All right, so I'm going to have to guess here that the Senku shift is going to be this 26 is 26 bars into the future. Yeah, so I'm thinking that the cloud is being shifted 26 bars into the future. All right, well, let's see. I'm not sure if, if this is even readable. So we'll have to do some testing here. Let's see. Yeah, we had this solver from previously that I will use. So yeah, this was looking at the Tenkan and the Kijun, but we'll see if we can adjust this to look at the cloud. So. All right, so maybe that's what this pre-Senku span A and pre-Senku span B, maybe that's what this is. Yeah. So. And let's connect this into the result node. And, oh. All right. Yeah, it looks like that's what those pre-plots are. Well, actually, they're not plots, they're data series. Yeah, so it looks like these pre-Senku span B and Senku span A are the values of our cloud that were shifted into the future. Yeah. So we can see that, right? Our cloud just crossed down. And so we have, right, this short output here of a couple of bars with a short output. And then also in the future, right, our cloud is pointed up. And so we also have a long output here. So, oh, yeah, look at this. Great. We even have further confirmation that this is working. Is you see these two bars where there's no output, right? That must mean the cloud lines equal each other. And if we look here, look right there. Those cloud lines definitely, they look like they equal each other for 2 bars. And so basically from here, we were able to look at the cloud lines in the future, right, using the pre values here. I should probably put on here pre, so we know that we're using the Senku A and Senku B cloud lines that are shifted into the future. All right, so we have number 3 here. So for a long entry, yeah, the future Kumo cloud needs to be bullish. Yep, yep, or at least crossed bullish. Cool. All right, there we go. So this would be number 3. So we'll put a number 3 on here. There we go. Yeah, so just, I guess another little, mental note here about the Ichimoku that I'm using. I'm gonna adventure to say that probably only the lizard indicator version of the Ichimoku, allows you to look at the Kumo cloud in the future. I doubt the other indicators out there probably don't have that ability. So I think this system would only work with the lizard indicator version. All right, let's move on to number 4 here. We're going to be comparing a bunch of bars, basically high and low prices of bars, to the Chikkou. So let's see, I think the Chikkou is the purple line, I believe. Let's make sure of that. Yeah, the Chikkou, yeah, is the dark orchid. And Chikou. All right, yeah, let's change it. Yeah, well, at least make it dashed, and I make it a little thicker as well. Since it is an important line, we'll make sure that we can see it. There we go. There's our Chikou. All right, so a simple one here, making sure the Chikou is free and clear of any price action. You know, again, price action is, you know, this word is so subjective. It can mean anything. So, you know, when you guys are saying, you know, words like price action, you really have to define it for somebody else to know, you know, well, what price action are you talking about? You know, price action is, it's kind of like the catch-all phrase for everything when people are talking, you know. Yeah, so here we actually have a precise definition of price action in this particular context. All right, so we're just going to make sure that basically none of these bars have crossed or touched our Chikou. Yep, so we need the Chikou to be above the high of the bars. All right, yeah, so for long we want the Chikou above the high. All right, so that is just a simple comparison solver. So that one will be pretty straightforward. All right, so let's grab a new comparison solver. So we want the Chikou to be above the high price. So all right, so this time we're actually going to put the Chikou line in input A. Right? A lot of the times, right, price goes in A, but this time we're going to do it the reverse way here. All right, so let's go grab our Ichimoku. All right, there's our Chikou span. And now input B, that'll be prices. All right, so for a long situation, we want the Chikou above the high price. And for a short, below the low price. So there we go. All right, and then the next thing is we need to look back 26 bars and make sure that this happened for all 26 bars backwards in time. Right? So for our look back, we don't want a displacement. We're going to set that to 0. We just want to look back 26 bars and make sure there is a minimum of 26 bars that all had the same, you know, requirement of the Chikou, right? But we need a minimum of 26 bars of the Chikou being above or below the higher low price. So there. All right, so looking at that on our chart, yeah. All right, so here is our Chikou line. Yeah, and we can see, right, all these bars were above the Chikou line. And so right here, where we started getting a short output, that means if we look back 26 bars, you know, all 26 of these bars, you know, basically were above the Chikou or not touching the Chikou. And yeah, if we look through all this, you know, we can see prices coming up here, you know, and it's running into the Chikou purple line. So yeah, so there was no output there. And here we go. So from here, if we look back, you know, whatever 26 bars are, I'm guessing 26 bars is around there. Yeah, if we look back, you know, 26 bars, right, we can see all these bars were below the purple line, right? And so we had a couple of bars here, where everything was good. All these bars were below the Chikkou line. So, all right, so that is that condition. So let's see what else we have. All right, so now we need to compare, price to the Tenkan and the Kijun. So again, price is subjective, so I'm just going to use the closing price. And, all right, I wonder if I have any. No, I don't think we have any comparison solvers. Comparing price to the Ichimoku. So let's just grab a new comparison solver. Drop that down here. All right, so input A, again, is going to be the indicator instead of price. No, I'm sorry. We want price above. There we go. Correct that real quick. All right, so input A, this will be price. There's our closing prices. Input B, that will be the Tenkan. All right, the Tenkan is already selected for us. Call it good. Let's connect that in. And remember, the Tenkan line is the blue line. So there we go. As long as the close is above it, we're getting along. And here, there's a lot going on with the Ichimoku, but here we go. Here's our blue line. And we can see the bars are closing below the blue line. And so we're getting a short there. Okay, so that's been verified. We know that's working. So now let's go and make a copy of this comparison solver. Let's make a copy. And this time, Kijun. All right, so let's go into input B and select the Kijun line. There you go. There's the Kijunsen. All right. Let's go back to our logic board, our logic tab. Go to our existing nodes. And there's our new solver at the bottom of the list. And the Kijun line is the red line. Yep, so remember, the red line is the Kijun. Yeah, we had one bar closing below the Kijun right there where the cursor's at. There for a short. Otherwise, the Kijun has been above. Okay, so that is number 5. And all right, number 6. All right, so number 6 is placing a buy order. Right now, of course, hopefully you guys should know that indicators cannot place orders. So we can't do number 6. That will have to wait until tomorrow's Blackbird workshop. And yeah, same thing for the stop loss. Yeah, stop loss will have to wait for tomorrow's Blackbird workshop for the strategy. Yeah, all right. And then also, all right, yeah, so here's another subjective, very, very subjective, rule here when placing the orders, which is, making sure that price hasn't moved away from the TK lines, the Tenkan and Kijun lines. So, of course, that's, considerably stretched is a very subjective word, so you can't put that into software. And then also, wait for price to pull back to where, that again, that's another subjective term. So, so we won't be able to do that part. That'll just have to be a very, discretionary component to this. Yeah. to this trading methodology here. So, but in any case, let's see here. So those will have to wait till tomorrow. All right, so let's finish tying this all together. So we have we have rule 5, 4, and 3 that all needs to be tied into basically 1 and 2. So you could think of 1 and 2 as being kind of like the signal trigger that determines the single bar, of which the trade signal would be fired on. And then 3, 4, and 5 are basically filtering conditions, right? To kind of create permissions as to when, the signal bar or the signaling condition, is permitted or allowed. So we need to take an AND node. And so basically this OR node, this OR node identifies, the signal bars, so to speak. And then everything else here is just all filtering. And that should do it. So let's take a look. Doesn't look like there's a lot of signals. There we go. All right, we actually got one. Let's kind of take a look here. Oh, we need to look into the future. So we can see the blue and the red lines cross down. And stretch that out a little bit. There we go. So there is our crossing Tenkan and Kijun lines. Below the cloud, across down below the cloud. So there was no cloud thickness requirement. And wow, look at this. Surprisingly, all these bars were above the Chikkou line. Even this guy here managed to get above the Chikkou line. And there we go. That was it. Oh, and also the close of the bar was below the Tenkan and the Kijun lines as well. So yeah, so basically we need the cloud and the Tenkan and the Kijun lines to be above, right, the close of the bar. But then we need the Chikkou to be below the prices. So yeah, basically this, now that we kind of built everything, we can look at this. We can determine that basically the crossover and the bars, the price bars, need to be kind of trapped right between the cloud and the Chikkou here in order to fire off correctly. Of course, we can get the crossover above the cloud, with a cloud thickness condition. Which I doubt it's going to happen that often. Yeah, here we go. So we have a crossover above the cloud, right? A cross up above the cloud and below the Chikkou, the purple line. Cool. So I think, if we want to see more signals, what we're going to have to do, here we go. Here's the solver for rule number 2. Yeah, so we have this is basically checking the Kumo cloud thickness. There. So let's probably double this thickness here and see if we can find some other signals here just to make sure that the system's working, right? Make sure that our logic is working correctly. All right, this is a cross down below the cloud, so that's not it. Yeah, it looks like we're only getting signals on the correct side of the cloud. All right. Yeah, we are getting crossover signals on the wrong side of the cloud, but it just looks like the Chikkou line is encountering interference. Yeah. So, yeah, it looks like the Chikkou line is causing a lot of interference, and it's just, yeah, either the price is hitting the Chikkou line, or the Chikkou line is just, it's on the wrong side of price. Price is on the wrong side of the Chikkou line. Yeah. So it doesn't look like we're going to be able to test that scenario, but, we are looking at crossover signals on the opposite side of the cloud, right? So here's a cross up, but it's below the cloud. So at least we know that the crossover filtering is working. So yeah, it's just a matter of the Chikkou, not being interfered with by price. So all right, so I think we're just gonna have to leave it at that and call it good.